we've just had an opportunity to meet with District Attorney Angel McAgraff, and she shared with the family that there will be a grand jury that she will turn this case over to once they have collected all the information and finished their investigation.
The local sheriff insisted this was just a tragic accidental drowning, but a massive showdown behind closed doors just changed everything. Following a tense, direct confrontation with Ben Crump and a grieving family, the Mississippi District Attorney made a bombshell announcement. The entire case is officially going before a grand jury. But it gets deeper. Prosecutors just granted a legal agreement allowing independent experts to raid Nolan Wells' recovered cell phone for hidden data. Will a grand jury look at this new forensic evidence and uncover a criminal cover-up, or will the state's original narrative stand? Today, we go inside the grand jury process to examine the exact legal thresholds that will determine if this investigation faces criminal indictments. If you want the truth behind cases like this, hit subscribe. Welcome to U.S. Crime Cases, where we break down the facts step by step. You know, when you look at a case like this, it is impossible not to feel the heavy weight of it all. We're talking about Nolan Wells, just 18 years old, a young man who went out for the 4th of July weekend to celebrate with people he knew. His family expected him home. Instead, they were thrown into every parent's absolute worst nightmare when his body was found by a park ranger in the water near the northwest tip of Horn Island a couple of days later. I mean, try to put yourself in their shoes for a second. The devastating shock of losing a son is hard enough, but then you add in the confusion, the conflicting stories, and the agonizing wait for answers. It is just heartbreaking. But on Wednesday, July 15th, things took a very serious turn. Nolan's parents sat down in a room with District Attorney Angel McAgraff. They did not go in alone. They had civil rights attorney Ben Crump and attorney Eric Hertz right by their side. According to Crump, this meeting was not a screaming match. He described it as respectful, honest, and candid. It was actually the first time the family had sat face-to-face with the district attorney since Nolan was recovered. And coming out of that room, two major developments were locked in. First, once the local police wrap up their active investigation, the entire file is going straight to a grand jury. Second, the district attorney agreed to let the family's own independent digital experts inspect Nolan's cell phone right alongside the state technicians. Wow, you do not see that happen every day. But right here, we need to pause and be incredibly clear about what is actually going on, because the internet has a habit of taking a piece of news and running wild with it. This announcement from the DA does not mean anyone has been arrested. It does not mean anyone is officially charged with a crime. Prosecutors have not concluded that Nolan was killed by someone, and there are absolutely no official suspects named. In fact, the district attorney's office stated that sending a contested or unnatural death investigation to a grand jury is just standard procedure down there in Jackson County. If you look at what local law enforcement has said from the beginning, Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter and his department have consistently stated they do not currently suspect foul play. They initially leaned toward this being a tragic drowning. The official cause and manner of death are still pending, waiting on the state medical examiner and toxicology reports. The sheriff's department made it clear that their investigation is still very much active and ongoing. They have been asking the public for unedited videos and photos from the island to help piece together the timeline. So the real debate we are looking at right now is whether this move to a grand jury is a massive legal shift, or if it is just the standard next step that happens to be getting a lot of attention because the public is watching so closely. To really grasp why this matters, we have to look at the two very different accounts of what happened that afternoon. According to the friends who were on the boat with Nolan, the teenager actually chose to stay behind on the island. The mother of one of those friends stated publicly that the group left around 4:30 p.m. because their boat was taking on water from a broken bilge pump. They claimed Nolan decided to stay on the beach with another group of people. I see how someone might think that makes sense on a busy holiday weekend if a boat is breaking down. But then you look at the other side. The family and their legal team are looking at that exact same story and arguing that it simply does not add up. Attorney Ben Crump publicly stated that there are glaring contradictions in the witnesses' accounts. For one, the family's legal team questioned why a teenager would voluntarily stay stranded on an island without his phone or his keys. The family noted that Nolan was a collegiate football player in peak physical condition and a very strong swimmer, which makes them question the simple drowning theory. The family even stated that when they recovered his phone from one of his friends back on the mainland, it appeared to them that messages and photos from that day were missing. Now, I have to stress this. That is an unverified claim from the family. Law enforcement has not confirmed that any data was intentionally wiped. It is just what the family believes they saw. But you can see why they are pushing so hard for answers. They even went as far as commissioning their own independent autopsy in Washington, D.C. to get a second opinion on the medical evidence. So how does a grand jury actually fix this? What do? Well, a Mississippi grand jury is not like a trial jury you see on television where they decide if someone is guilty or innocent. Instead, they act as an independent investigative body made up of everyday citizens. Their only job is to look at the evidence and decide if there is enough probable cause to support a criminal indictment. They do not need to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. They just need to see if the evidence points to a specific crime being committed by a specific person. This process is incredibly powerful because a grand jury can do things a grieving family cannot do. They can issue subpoenas for records. They can demand to see social media data, phone logs, and GPS tracking from the boats. More importantly, they can bring witnesses into a room and ask them questions under oath. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office noted they have already interviewed dozens of people, including the friends who were on the trip. But giving a statement to a deputy on the beach or in a living room is one thing. Sitting in a closed room, raising your right hand, and answering questions from a grand jury under the penalty of perjury is an entirely different environment. Will the stories hold up when the pressure is on? That is what the grand jury is there to find out. And they do all of this in total secrecy. The public will not get to sit in on these sessions. We probably will not hear the witness testimony or see the autopsy photos they are looking at. They will review the official medical reports, the toxicology screens, and all those witness statements side by side to see if they align. But perhaps the most crucial piece of evidence they will review comes from that cell phone agreement. Like we talked about earlier, allowing the family's independent experts to conduct a mutual inspection of the digital evidence alongside the state is highly unusual. Usually, the police take the phone into an evidence room and the family just has to wait for the results. But here they are working together. The FBI is even stepping in to help with the digital forensics, which the sheriff noted is standard since Horn Island is federal land. When these experts open up that phone, they are not just looking for text messages. They are diving into the metadata. They will be looking to clarify if information was actually deleted, and if so, exactly what time that deletion happened. They need to figure out if data disappeared because of a normal app setting, like Snapchat messages expiring, or if someone took deliberate action to erase a digital footprint. They will also look at the location data to see if the phone's movements match the timeline the friends provided about leaving the island at 4:30 p.m., right? Because even if someone hits delete on a photo, the phone's operating system often keeps a hidden log of when the camera was opened and where the device was physically located at that exact second. But there is a catch to all of this digital forensic work. Even if the experts recover a ton of data, it only matters from a legal standpoint if investigators can definitively connect it to Nolan's final hours and prove who was actually holding the phone at that time. When the grand jury finally gets all this material, they have two main options. They can issue a true bill or they can issue a no bill. If they issue a true bill, it means they found enough probable cause to approve an indictment. That would completely change the landscape of this case. It would shift from a tragic death investigation into a formal criminal prosecution. There would be charges, arraignments, and eventually the evidence would be challenged in open court where the public could finally see it. But remember, even an indictment does not mean is automatically guilty. They would still have the presumption of innocence and a chance to defend themselves at trial. On the flip side, the grand jury could return a no bill. This means that after looking at everything, they just did not find enough legal evidence to charge anyone with a crime. And I think this is a tough reality to swallow. A no bill does not mean the grand jury believes every witness told the absolute truth. It does not mean they solved every mystery about how Nolan ended up in the water. It just means the strict legal threshold to arrest someone was not met based on what was presented to them. If that happens, the case remains officially unresolved in the criminal courts, though local police might keep the file open for new evidence, and the family could look into civil lawsuits. The reason this announcement is such a massive deal is that it takes the case off social media and puts it into a formal legal arena. For weeks, we have seen theories, rumors, and accusations flying around online. We have heard the friend's side about the broken boat, and we have heard the family's side about the missing keys and the phone. Now, all of those claims have to stand up to the cold, hard scrutiny of a legal panel. The upcoming phone inspection might prove the timeline provided by the witnesses is completely accurate, or it might expose serious inconsistencies. The official and independent medical findings might point definitively to an accidental drowning, or they might reveal something else entirely. Ultimately, when the digital footprint, the scientific, medical reports, and the sworn accounts are placed on a table together, we will see if the evidence supports the initial assessment of a tragic accident, or if it points towards something much darker that demands criminal accountability. The family wants nothing but the truth, and right now, the grand jury is the most powerful tool they have to find it. We live our entire lives on our cell phones. You know exactly what I mean. Our private messages, our daily locations, our pictures, our bank accounts, our secrets. It is all sitting right there in a little glass rectangle we carry in our pockets everywhere we go. So when we talk about Nolan's cell phone, we are not just talking about a piece of plastic and wire. We are really talking about his digital footprint on the last day he was seen alive. The agreement regarding his cell phone is honestly one of the most unusual developments I have ever seen in a legal case like this, and it changes the entire dynamic of the investigation. Nolan's family previously stated that they strongly believed expected Snapchat content was completely missing when they finally got their hands on his phone. And they did not get this device from the police station, and it was not found washed up on the beach. They recovered his phone from the home of one of his friends on the evening of July 4. Wow. Think about that dynamic for a second. You are a parent. You realize your boy has not come home from a holiday boat trip. You are panicking, but his phone, his main lifeline to the world, is sitting securely inside a buddy's house back on the mainland. You can completely understand why that specific detail would put a grieving family on edge and make them question everything they're being told. But we have to be incredibly careful right here. I see how easy it is to jump to conclusions, but it must be noted that this remains an unverified allegation. There is absolutely zero verified proof right now that another person intentionally erased any evidence from that device. People panic, phones die, apps glitch, and rumors spread fast. We have to stick to what we can prove. But following that very tense, emotional meeting with the district attorney, Attorney Ben Crump announced something that made everyone in the legal field turn their heads in surprise. He stated that the family's independent digital experts and the state investigators will actually perform a mutual inspection of the device. Right. That is a massive deal in the legal world. Legal experts across the board point out that a shared inspection of evidence between a local police department and a victim's family is highly atypical. Usually, evidence goes into a brown paper bag, it gets sealed with red evidence tape, and it sits in a locked room until a trial starts. The family almost never gets a seat at the table to look at the raw data in real time. But here, They are doing it together. This joint inspection is going to look deep for potentially recoverable data. If you have ever accidentally deleted a photo or a text thread, you know it does not always just vanish into thin air immediately. There is a digital ghost left behind. Forensic experts will try to clarify whether information was actually deleted from Nolan's phone. And if they find that it was, they need to know exactly when that deletion occurred, right down to the minute. They need to figure out if that data loss resulted from normal app behavior, like Snapchat's automatic timers, where messages just naturally expire after being viewed, or if it was a basic account setting, or if it was a deliberate physical action taken by someone holding the device and trying to clear the screen. They will also look far past the physical hardware of the phone itself. They need to determine if cloud records preserve any information that is absent from the device. Tech companies keep massive logs on servers thousands of miles away, and sometimes those logs tell a story the phone tries to hide. They will check the internal GPS pings to see whether the phone's location data aligns perfectly with the timeline given by the witnesses. But here is the hard, cold truth of digital forensics. Even if a mountain of deleted data is magically recovered by these experts, it only matters legally if investigators can firmly connect that specific data to Nolan's final hours on Horn Island and confirm without a doubt who was actually controlling the phone at that exact time. If you haven't subscribed to U.S. Crime Cases, hit that button right now. We will uncover the real facts together, one careful step at a time. Moving forward into the actual legal process, the grand jury will likely need to evaluate 3 main streams of evidence to figure out what truly happened out there in the water. They cannot just rely on hearsay. They need hard facts. The first stream is, of course, that digital evidence we just talked about. And the local authorities are not trying to do this alone. The FBI is currently assisting local law enforcement with the forensic examination of all this digital data. Now, before anyone assumes this means it is automatically a federal crime or some massive conspiracy, Sheriff Ledbetter noted that this assistance is completely standard. Horn Island is a piece of federal land managed by the National Park Service. Because they are operating in that specific federal jurisdiction, local authorities frequently coordinate with federal agencies to use their advanced labs and better technology. It is a normal procedural step to make sure the data extraction is done flawlessly and holds up in court. The second stream of evidence the grand jury has to untangle is the witness evidence, and there is a massive amount of it to sort through. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office reported interviewing dozens of witnesses. You have to remember, this was the 4th of July weekend. The island was packed with tourists, boats, and families celebrating. But obviously, the most critical interviews belong to the friends who traveled with Nolan on the boat that day. They're the ones who hold the key to his final known movements. According to public statements from the family of one of those friends, the group decided to leave the island around 4:30 in the afternoon. Their reasoning was that their boat was taking on water because of a malfunctioning bilge pump. That is a genuine, terrifying emergency when you are out on the open water. If your boat is going down, you have to leave immediately. They claimed that because of this chaotic situation, Nolan actually chose to stay behind on the beach with another group of people rather than risk riding back on a sinking boat. I see the logic in that split-second decision if you are just looking at boat mechanics, but the family's attorneys have publicly and aggressively questioned this narrative. They are asking the same agonizing question any parent would ask in this situation. Why would an 18-year-old teenager voluntarily stay on a remote island without his phone or his keys? Think about the logistics of that for a second. How was he supposed to get a ride back to the mainland later that night? How was he going to contact anyone when he got back? How was he going to unlock his front door? It simply defies the normal behavior of a teenager. The grand jury is going to need to take these witness accounts and match them strictly against the objective digital and location records. They need to see if the boat's GPS, the phone's cell tower pings, and the witness testimonies all tell the exact same story, or if someone is lying. The third and final stream is the medical evidence. This is where the science has to speak for Nolan, because he can no longer speak for himself. The official autopsy results from Jackson County coroner Bruce Lind are still pending. These scientific reports take a significant amount of time, and the wait is pure torture for a family. They are often waiting on complex toxicological screening to see if anything was in his system, as well as microscopic tissue analysis to determine if he drowned while breathing or if he was in the water after the fact. Meanwhile, the family felt they could not just sit around and wait in the dark for the county to hand them a piece of paper. They took matters into their own hands and commissioned an independent autopsy, which was funded in part by Colin Kaepernick. That secondary procedure is being conducted right now in Washington, D.C. by a highly respected former chief medical examiner. As of the family's meeting with the district attorney, the results of this independent autopsy had not been publicly released to the media or the authorities. The central question for the investigators and soon for the citizens sitting on that grand jury is whether these three distinct streams of evidence will align. Will the digital footprint, the sworn witness accounts, and the hard medical findings all support a single undeniable timeline, or will they point in wildly conflicting directions, forcing the justice system to look much harder at the people who saw him last? We can only hope that wherever the evidence leads, it finally brings some measure of peace and undeniable truth to a family that has been living a nightmare since the 4th of July. We ended off talking about those three streams of evidence, and that leads us exactly to why understanding the legal threshold for an indictment explains why this grand jury process matters so much, right? When you hear the words grand jury, you probably picture a packed courtroom, a judge banging a gavel, and lawyers yelling at each other like on television. But that is not how this works in real life. A grand jury does not need enough evidence to actually convict someone at a trial. The citizens sitting on this panel are not deciding if someone is guilty or innocent, and they are not handing down sentences. Jurors only consider whether probable cause exists to formally accuse a person of a crime. That is a massive difference in the legal world. An indictment means only that the jury found sufficient evidence for criminal charges to proceed. It does not mean the accused person is proven guilty. Wow. When you think about it, that is a relatively low bar compared to a full criminal trial, but it is still a very strict legal threshold that prosecutors have to respect. In Mississippi, the state courts have outlined that grand juries have broad investigative authority to examine possible offenses. They can cast a wide net, pulling in documents, experts, and testimonies behind closed doors. But they cannot just indict someone because a situation feels suspicious or looks bad on social media. They need concrete facts. For example, let us talk about Nolan's belongings. We know his phone and keys ended up back on the mainland. According to the family's attorneys, they found that highly suspicious, questioning why a young man would stay on a remote island without them. But legally speaking, merely returning from Horn Island with Nolan's belongings would not automatically justify criminal charges. Law enforcement stated they do not currently suspect foul play, and authorities cannot just arrest someone for holding a phone or driving a boat back to shore. Prosecutors would need hard, undeniable evidence connecting a specific person to a specific criminal offense, showing probable cause for every single required element of that law. This raises a very serious procedural debate right now. Could the contested circumstances surrounding the timeline be enough to demand further investigation while still short of the standard needed for an actual indictment? I see how frustrating that reality must be for a grieving family. You lose your son, you see things that simply do not make sense to you, and yet the law requires a very specific type of proof before it acts. It is a heavy burden to carry while you are mourning and searching for answers. Now, let us talk about the two ways this can end once the jurors look at all the evidence. If the grand jury decides to issue what is called a true bill, that means they officially approve an indictment. This outcome would completely change the reality for everyone involved. A true bill would lead to formal criminal charges, arrests, or court summons, and eventual pretrial proceedings. Suddenly, the secret grand jury files become the foundation for a public trial. The evidence would then be challenged in open court, giving the public and the media much greater access to the actual allegations and the forensic reports. If a true bill happens, any defendants named would immediately receive the presumption of innocence and the legal opportunity to aggressively contest the case in front of a judge. A true bill would fundamentally shift the case from a death investigation into a criminal prosecution. But I have to repeat this because it is so important. It would not guarantee a conviction. It just means the state believes they have enough verified information to take it to trial. For a family sitting at home waiting for the phone to ring, a true bill is the moment the justice system officially steps up and says, "We believe a crime happened here and we are going to do something about it." Conversely, the grand jury could return a no bill. A no bill means the jurors did not find enough evidence to indict anyone based on the material presented by prosecutors. You can just feel the gravity of what that would mean for the people who loved Nolan, but we have to be objective here. A no bill does not necessarily declare that every witness told the exact truth. It does not mean that every single question about that afternoon on the water is definitively answered. It simply means the strict legal threshold for criminal charges was not met at that specific time, which is provided by the police. If a no bill is returned, it does not mean the door is slammed shut forever. Local authorities stated they might continue their investigation if new leads emerge. The family could also pursue civil legal options depending on the available evidence, like a wrongful death lawsuit, which has a much lower burden of proof than a criminal trial. But criminally speaking, the case would remain officially unresolved without criminal charges. Any future legal action would depend entirely on Mississippi law, prosecutorial decisions, and the discovery of meaningful new evidence. So, this brings us back to the core of why this update is the grand jury decision that changes everything in the Nolan Wells case. The development that changes this case is the decision to take it out of the hands of the rumor mill and place the finalized investigation before citizens empowered to decide if a prosecutable offense actually exists. We are moving from online theories to the actual legal system. The upcoming joint phone inspection might strengthen the established timeline given by the witnesses, weaken the family's allegations of data tampering, or create completely new legal questions that nobody saw coming. The pending medical findings from both the county coroner and the independent Washington, D.C. examiner may support the police's preliminary assessment of drowning, challenge it entirely with new forensic evidence, or remain scientifically inconclusive. The witness accounts might align perfectly under oath, or the formal review process might expose conflicts that investigators simply cannot ignore anymore. When the digital footprint, the medical reports, and the sworn accounts are finally placed together in that secret room, will they support criminal charges, or will they show that public speculation outpaced the verifiable evidence? That is the absolute center of this entire tragedy. We have a young man who lost his life, a family shattered by grief, and a community demanding to know the truth. They want nothing but the truth, without the noise and the internet theories. As we follow this process over the next few weeks and months, several specific questions remain for discussion, and these are the things we really need to think about as this plays out. First, with the district attorney referring the case to a grand jury, how standard is it really for a prosecutor to utilize an independent panel of citizens to review a high-profile death investigation when the preliminary police findings indicate a drowning? The district attorney said it is standard procedure, but the timing certainly has people talking. Second, the DA and the family's legal team agreed to a mutual cell phone inspection. What specific types of metadata or location logging are essential for investigators to isolate when trying to verify a timeline given by witnesses? We know the timeline is the most contested part of this story, so that digital footprint is going to be heavily scrutinized by the technicians. Third, if the independent autopsy findings from Washington, D.C. differ from the initial municipal medical evaluation, what is the legal process by which a grand jury weighs conflicting expert testimonies to determine probable cause? Do they trust the county coroner, or do they lean toward the independent expert hired by the family? And finally, A grand jury's decision results in either a true bill for indictments or a no bill if evidence is insufficient. If a no bill is returned, what legal avenues really remain available to a family seeking further judicial review? They have been fighting so hard for transparency, and a no bill would be a devastating hurdle. We will have to wait and see what the citizens of Mississippi decide when the facts are laid out before them. Thank you so much for staying till the end to uncover the facts with us today. Please subscribe to U.S. Crime Cases for more truth.